This is a developing global crisis, and what just happened in the Middle East could have immediate consequences for fuel prices, economies, and stability worldwide. The latest escalation between Iran and Israel is no longer just a regional conflict. It is now raising urgent fears of a full-scale global oil shock. Here's what the latest reports are really telling us. Over the past several days, tensions between Iran and Israel have intensified sharply, moving beyond isolated strikes into a sustained cycle of retaliation. According to available information, both sides have expanded their targets, hitting not only military positions but also critical infrastructure, and that is where the situation becomes far more dangerous. Because this is no longer only about missiles and military strategy, it is now about energy, and energy is what connects this conflict directly to the rest of the world. Recent developments indicate that key energy assets in and around the region have either been struck or placed under threat. Reports suggest that gas fields and strategic facilities linked to Iran's energy sector have been targeted, while Iran has signaled its willingness to retaliate in ways that could disrupt global supply routes. The most critical concern right now centers on one location, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most important oil transit choke points on Earth. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes through it. If that flow is disrupted even partially, the impact would be immediate and global. And now, for the first time in this escalation, there are growing fears that the conflict could spill into this vital corridor. Early indicators show increased military presence in the region, heightened alert levels among Gulf states, and rising anxiety in global markets. Oil prices have already begun reacting to the uncertainty, not necessarily because supply has collapsed, but because the risk of disruption is suddenly very real and in global energy markets. Risk alone can move prices. What makes this moment especially volatile is the combination of three factors happening at once. First, direct confrontation between Iran and Israel is intensifying, with both sides showing no clear sign of backing down. Second, critical infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure, is increasingly being pulled into the conflict zone. And third, major global powers, including the United States, are now more deeply involved, raising the stakes even further. According to reports, U.S. military assets have been repositioned in the region, and additional deployments are being considered. While officials have not indicated a desire for wider war, the reality is that any miscalculation could rapidly escalate the situation beyond control. This is where the global oil crisis fears begin to take shape, because if the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted even temporarily, the consequences would not be limited to the Middle East. Fuel prices could spike worldwide. Supply chains would feel immediate pressure. Inflation, which many countries are still struggling to control, could surge again, and economies already under stress could face a new wave of uncertainty. In simple terms, what is happening in this region right now has the potential to affect everyday life across continents, and that is why markets are watching every development so closely. At the same time, regional actors are being pulled into the situation in complex ways. Gulf countries, many of which rely heavily on stable oil exports, are now navigating a highly sensitive environment. Any attack or disruption within their territory or even near their shipping routes could draw them further into the conflict. There are also growing concerns about non-state actors and proxy groups becoming more active. Historically, conflicts involving Iran and Israel have often extended beyond direct confrontation, involving allied groups across the region. If that pattern intensifies, the conflict could expand geographically, making containment even more difficult. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts appear to be struggling to keep pace with events on the ground. Calls for de-escalation have been made by multiple international actors, but so far there is little evidence of a breakthrough, and that raises a critical question. How far could this go? At this stage, there are several possible scenarios, each with different implications. In the most contained scenario, both sides continue limited strikes without directly targeting global energy routes. Even in that case, volatility would remain high, but the global impact might be manageable. In a more serious scenario, energy infrastructure continues to be targeted and shipping routes face intermittent disruption. This would likely drive sustained increases in oil prices and create ripple effects across global markets. But the most severe scenario, and the one driving current fears, is a significant disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. Even a temporary closure or major incident could send shockwaves through the global economy, and right now that risk, while not certain, is no longer theoretical. Another layer of complexity comes from the internal dynamics within Iran and Israel themselves. Leadership decisions, public pressure, and strategic calculations are all influencing how each side responds, and in highly charged situations like this, decisions can shift rapidly. At the same time, global powers are weighing their responses carefully. Any direct involvement carries risks not only of escalation but also of widening the conflict into a broader regional or even international confrontation. So what we are seeing is a highly fragile situation where multiple actors are making high-stakes decisions under pressure, and that is exactly the kind of environment where unexpected developments can occur. For now, the key indicators to watch are clear. First, any signs of disruption in oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. Second, further targeting of energy infrastructure in the region. And third, any escalation involving additional countries or major powers. Each of these would signal a significant shift in the trajectory of this conflict. It is also important to understand that markets often react faster than political decisions. Even rumors or perceived threats can trigger price movements, supply adjustments, and economic responses, and we are already seeing early signs of that energy. Markets are tightening, shipping risks are being reassessed, and governments are beginning to prepare for potential contingencies. All of this points to one reality: the situation is not just unstable, it is evolving quickly, and in a globalized world, that evolution does not stay contained. As of now, there is no confirmed large-scale disruption to global oil supply, but the risk is rising, and that risk alone is enough to create significant pressure. What happens next will depend on decisions made in the coming days, possibly even hours. Will there be a move toward de-escalation? Or will further strikes push the situation closer to a breaking point? At this moment, the answer remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: this is no longer just a regional conflict between Iran and Israel. It is a developing global concern with the potential to impact energy, economics, and security on a worldwide scale, and the world is now watching very closely. Because if the current trajectory continues, the consequences could extend far beyond the battlefield into markets, homes, and economies everywhere. This is a rapidly changing situation, and the next developments could define what comes next, not just for the Middle East, but for the global order itself. Stay alert, because what happens from here could change everything.